Hello, this is Corey Durbin, CEO of SHARx, and this is the Rising Tides podcast. Each week, I have the privilege of speaking with influential athletes about their rise to fame, the dedication to their sport, and what it takes to be successful. Let's dive in. Brock, it's good to see you again. How are you, my friend?
Great to see you as well, Corey. I'm busy in the midst of a fun ending to the college football season, but life's good. Everything's great in my direction. How about yours?
Doing great as well. Is it ending or just beginning? What a wild season. It's hard to believe it's been August, September. We have 4 months or whatever since we talked, but what a wild season, huh?
Yeah, I'd say it's ending, but now we're getting to the good stuff, right? We're getting to the first ever 12-team playoff, bowl games, FCS playoffs, and this is the real exciting part. I think last weekend we had just a tremendous lineup of championship games on Championship Saturday. You know, the ACC championship came down to a game-winning field goal as time expired. The SEC, they had their first ever overtime game, and there was a bunch of other great ones. So anyways, fun time to be involved with football.
Well, selfishly, as a guy that's running SHARx and have you as a awesome brand ambassador for us, I'm kind of looking forward to the end of the season because I know we have a lot of things we're going to get to work on together. And I also love college football, so I think this 12-team playoff is fantastic. What surprised you the most this season, just when you look back on the regular season so far?
I don't know if it was necessarily a surprise, but what really stands out to me is the parity that exists in college football now. You saw Alabama go down to the likes of, and with all due respect, but Vanderbilt, a team that, over the past couple decades hasn't been known as a winning program in college football. They obviously put together an incredible story this year, and they're bowl eligible, and that's great. But you don't hear Alabama going down to Vanderbilt very often.
No.
And there's 20 other examples like that. You look at the Big 12 conference. Even going into the final weekend of the regular season, there was something like 7-8 teams that were technically eligible to make the conference title game out of 16 teams. So look at the parity in that conference. You saw the same thing in the ACC playoff all year. Everybody was talking about Miami, and rightfully so. Quarterback Cam Ward, Mario Cristobal, what they've done with that program and the year they really had into the final month was just spectacular and so exciting. But a couple, games where they stubbed their toe in November, and now all of a sudden they miss out on the ACC championship. And so I think my point with that is week in and week out, you just saw a ton of great matchups, a lot of great games. Until the fourth quarter, you didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And because of that, I think college football was more exciting than ever this season.
Yeah, 100%. And your boys, I mean, I know you're still pretty close to the Arizona State football program, and what a great weekend for them. I mean, they looked fantastic, and things kind of fell into place with Clemson losing as well, eh?
It really did, and yes, you're right. You gotta tip the cap to Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State. First outright conference title since 1996, back when Jake the Snake Plummer was playing quarterback. What a great team that was. But it's truly incredible. And you talk about the parity, like I just mentioned, Arizona State came into the regular season, and in every preseason media poll was picked to finish dead last in the Big 12, 16 out of 16. And you have to give the players and that coaching staff a ton of credit because they put the blinders on, they covered their ears, and they ignored the outside noise and just went to work. And they're a football team. If you watched from the beginning of the year until when they won the Big 12 title over Iowa State last weekend, they got better every single week and came together as a team. Arizona State truly plays great complementary football in all three phases: offense, defense, special teams. Yes, there is a star and running back Cam Scattaboo, and he's super exciting to watch play football, the physical nature he plays with. But outside of him, I mean, They really are a true team, and they have some emerging stars, but they did it as a unit, and it was a lot of fun to watch.
I love watching Cam Scadaboo play. He's phenomenal. Since you brought him up, you've got Ashton Genty, obviously deservedly so, as a Heisman finalist. And I was chuckling over Cam's comment. Not that he, as a competitor, I'm wondering how you view this with him proclaiming he was the best running back in all of college football.
Yeah, it's interesting, Corey, because if Ashton Genty doesn't have the year that he has for Boise State, you probably do hear a lot more about Cam Scadaboo. You also probably hear a lot more about Cam if Arizona State didn't win 3 games last year. In the offseason, everybody in the national media, when it comes to college football, we talked about Ashton Genty, and we talked about his Heisman chances and the type of year he would have. Where Cam Scadaboo has kind of become known to the country and the college football world really in the last 2-3 months, really the last month. So unless you follow West Coast football. So you take that combined with, and this as a former athlete, if you play the game with a mindset that you're not the best and that you're not going to win and that you're not going to have success, it's really hard to go out and compete at a high level on a national stage with so much at stake. So although I think Cam Scadaboo is a tremendous player, I think Ashton Genty's a great player in his own right. I respect the comments. I get it. But they're both 2 very talented running backs.
Yeah, well, he's a baller clearly. And well, you had Boise State's bowl game last year, if I recall, as a broadcaster, as an analyst. And I remember you talking about him, coming into this season at the end of last year and being a Heisman candidate at that time.
Yeah, we were very well aware of him. He had a tremendous season a year ago, and obviously he followed it up with an even better one, record-setting one this season, and he's still chasing Barry Sanders, and he has more time to do it to get that ultimate single season rushing mark. But he was easy to jump onto the radar. When you turn on the tape and you watch him play football a year ago when I was prepping for the LA Bowl when they played UCLA, his skill set jumps out to you. He's extremely talented. He's patient, tremendous vision, all the things that make up a great running back. But I think the thing that's more impressive about Ashton is when you talk to the coaching staff at Boise and when you talk to people around that program, they talk about the young man that he is. And it goes beyond just what he's doing on the football field. And I want to give him some credit here, in the day and age of NIL, in the transfer portal. He was certainly highly, highly sought after last season. And I'm sure he had some very lucrative options to go play football elsewhere. But he came right out and said, listen, Boise State was the school that believed in me coming out of high school. And I'm going to honor that. I have unfinished business here. I want to do something that has never been done here before, and that's win a Heisman and compete for a national title. So I think that needs to be commended and that needs to be recognized. And it says a lot about the person that Ashton Genty is.
I'm a little bit biased. I haven't done a lot right as a dad, at least maybe not as much as most. But one thing I did right is I raised 2 daughters that love football. And my older daughter goes to Boise State. So I've seen in person and on TV a lot of Boise State football this year. And I mean, teams will stack 8-9 guys in the box and basically say, you're not running on us. And he still gets his. And I don't know that he had a game where he didn't have a 60 or 70 yard run, and he outruns everybody too. So he's awfully good. I think you and we had a brief conversation about this, and I think you said you don't have the tenure yet to have a Heisman vote, but your Heisman vote would have been.
Wow, putting me right on the spot.
And if you don't want to say it, we don't have to talk about it. But
no, I would say this. The Heisman race this year, I just think it's so fun because you really do have 2 players in Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty, and that's with all due respect to Dylan Gabriel and Cam Ward, who will also be going to New York City this week, and they're finalists for the award as well. But Travis Hunter, what he's done playing defensive back, wide receiver, and then Ashton Genty, what he's done from the running back position, we haven't seen that in a while. Usually it's just, as we all know, it's kind of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the country. It seems like go back to New York City, and they're sitting there. We're waiting to see who's crowned the award. But this year was different. Like I said, Ashton Genty, and I love what you said, Corey. He was facing loaded boxes all season long. 7, 8 defenders in there. Even cornerbacks, yes, they have obligations to cover the receivers and safeties, but they had eyes in the backfield. And so, Ashton he had a tall task ahead of him and just prevailed. And like I said, it was a record-setting year. Just unbelievably impressive what he did. And then same for Travis Hunter. All eyes were on him. When he was playing offense, people knew that Shedeur Sanders was going to try to get him the football, and they couldn't stop it. And I think that says a lot about the type of player he is. And then the plays he makes on defense. The kid doesn't come out of the game ever. He's playing 100-plus snaps a game. He's doing it with ease. So whoever wins the award out of those 4, and I think we all kind of know where it's headed. It's probably going to be Travis or Ashton. Both are very deserving of the award.
Well, spoken like a well-seasoned politician, Mr. Osweiler, and we've got a brand ambassador who was a well-known congressman, so you might be able to give him a couple tips if he ever decides to. Well said. Well, talking about the parity, because I think that's interesting. What do you think is the biggest reason? Because you look at some of the teams, like you take Indiana, right? Or you take SMU going into ACC and winning the conference championship, and Vanderbilt you already alluded to, and there's more examples and individual games that you're like, there's no way that team beats that team. Is NIL, and what about it is the biggest factor, or what do you think is the biggest factor in what I think is a fairly new trend with parity this year?
It certainly is new. And I think, and I could be wrong, this is just simply my opinion. I think it's NIL coupled with the transfer portal. And I think for a very, very long time, the blue bloods of college football, Texas, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State, to name a few, stockpiled the majority of the talent. And you went there because you knew you were going to have the opportunity to compete for a national title, be an All-American, and play in the National Football League. Mm-hmm. Now, in order to get to that playing point, sometimes you had to redshirt and be a backup for a couple years, but eventually you were going to get your opportunity to be a starter. And I think what you're seeing with NIL now, the transfer portal, is you're seeing less of a stockpile of talent. I think you're seeing younger players who realize they're going to have to sit for 2 or 3 years, which that's a different conversation if that's better for them or not. But they're not sitting there waiting to play at that blue blood program. They're transferring out, going to another very quality power conference school, making money while doing it, but they're getting the opportunity to play and showcase their talent. Now, on the flip side, you're at one of those blue blood programs, and a young player comes in, he plays well early. Maybe he gets an opportunity, whether that be in fall camp, week 1, 2, whatever the case may be, and he finds himself taking a starting position very quickly. Well, now you're getting that veteran player saying, well, hey, I just lost my starting job. And rather than in our previous days of college football, him just becoming a backup and adding quality depth to that program, he's now hopping in the transfer portal and going to make money and start for another power conference school. So with that, I think you're seeing the talent pool of high school players and college transfers kind of disperse itself out. And now you're getting more programs with more quality players.
Yeah, it makes for some really fun football to watch. And it sure seems like the players have a lot of power right now. Good, bad, and different. Not really a comment to that. And You see some of the guys that are jumping into the portal at the end of the year that were freshmen that didn't play much, but were 4 or 5-star recruits. And now they're like, well, I might as well, time for me to shop again. Because I think they may be, I won't name names, but what I've seen is they may be leveraging to their coaching staff saying, you want to keep me? Yeah, I got paid last year, but that's not going to do it for next year. Do you think I'm right on that take?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think you're wrong. And with your point, Corey, the person that I feel for is the head coach and the coaching staff. As good as it is for the player to be able to maximize their college eligibility, make some money while doing it, which in a lot of situations can be life-changing for them, their family, future generations, and find a place where they can play. For the head coach that recruits these kids and is trying to build an actual roster and look at a timeline of, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead, they can't do that anymore. These
Right.
coaches are truly living season to season right now. They're having to spend just as much time recruiting their own roster, to your point, to make sure that a young, talented kid who might be slightly disgruntled does not leave their program. So I see it both ways. I see where it's very difficult on the coaching staff. There's also things with the player that I think some life lessons are now being lost in this. I can speak to this. My sophomore year at Arizona State, I lost the starting quarterback battle in fall camp to a Michigan transfer, Stephen Threed. And in the day and age of the transfer portal, there's a good chance that maybe at the end of that season, I would have been disgruntled, and then maybe I would have gone into the transfer portal, and there was a school willing to pay for my services. But I stayed the course because that's how football was back then. And I just continued to work harder, become more determined. And then when my opportunity did come to be the starting quarterback for the head coach that I committed to out of high school, Dennis Erickson, I was ready to play. We had a good year. And that kind of worked out. So I think a lot of these kids, they face adversity now, and the first thought is to run from it rather than facing it head on, which I think you would probably attest to. There's a lot of life lessons in that, and there's a lot of grit that's taught in that, and overcoming those obstacles and challenges. So like anything in life, I think there's pros and cons to it. It's something that's in flux. It's constantly being massaged and worked on to find the best formula, but we haven't found it yet.
Yeah, I think you're really spot on that point, and that's that. I do wonder if we're going to do some damage to some of the kids in this generation, because we already have this, instant society with our phones and all the things that we can do social media wise and the information we get and all that stuff. And without this becoming a soapbox, it's just you hope that the lesson and the value of athletics doesn't start to get diminished of the things you learn as a player, whether you succeed ultimately as much as you want to personally, but the growth that happens from being a part of the team. And maybe you're not the star of the team, maybe you're just playing a role here, but your team is successful. And or maybe you have to work 3 years and you don't start till your senior year, but all of a sudden all that growth made you into who you are, and maybe some of that starts to go away. But I think you're spot on that, at least. And there's, like you said, pluses and minuses to both. Back to the Arizona State thing. I mean, because I think they're a microcosm of, some success that a lot of schools did experience this year that maybe they weren't on the radar. And first of all, as close as you are to the program, did you have any idea? Did you see it coming? And and if you did or didn't, other than the fact that Coach Dillingham did amazing work without question, where did it all of a sudden develop? Because even when I was talking to you back then, I'm not sure I got a sense that you thought they're going to be really good this year.
Yeah, I would certainly be lying if I said to you that I thought Arizona State was going to win the Big 12 back in August. But I will say this, and I said it a little bit earlier in this call. Arizona State is a true team, and you know, it's in this day and age where there's so much I, me, this, I, there. It is a we unit there, and what Coach Dillingham has done so well is he has recruited kids to Arizona State. They're 2-star guys, they're 3-star guys. Guys that have been overlooked. He did go out into the portal and get some guys from some blue blood schools, but they hadn't really played there. So they were kind of untapped potential, and you didn't necessarily know what you were getting. But what he did, and the core component to all of these kids, is he went and found kids that love to compete. And they want to work hard no matter what the situation is, whether they're competing on the practice field, in the weight room, off the field, having fun with one another. They all want to compete. So what Kenny went out and did is he went out and recruited kids that love to compete. And that is truly the most important makeup of what Arizona State has going, is they have these kids on this roster that they know everybody in the country overlooked them. They were picked 16 out of 16. They were supposed to take dead last in the Big 12. And they put that chip on their shoulder, and they carried it with them throughout the offseason, throughout fall camp. And they used it for fuel and motivation. And with that, I remember being at the spring game, and I was watching the team play, and you could tell that they were going to be better than the previous year in Kenny's first season as the head coach. But you couldn't tell how much better. To be honest, I looked at it and I probably thought they were a 6, maybe a 7-win team. So they were improving. They were going the right direction. There were some turnovers in the spring game. There was some sloppy play. But what has happened with this team, and if you go back to week 1 and watch them, and then week 2 and week 3, they get better every week. They don't make the same mistakes twice. And that's what great teams do. That's what great athletes do. You're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. The question is, can you learn from them, get better from them, and then make sure that they don't happen again? And that's really what ASU's done this season on their way to a Big 12 conference title. And now they're at the point where they're just playing with so much confidence. And Corey, you know this, and I know you love playing golf and you play a lot of golf. When your swing's good and you've won a couple matches recently and you're confident in what you're doing and things that you're going to go out there and you're going to play good golf. You're going to swing freely. You're going to rip it. You're going to have some fun. And you're going to play well while doing so. And that's really what this ASU team's doing. The schedule lined up for them. They got better week in and week out. They were able to lean on Cam Scattaboo in the running game early in the season. And they just got better and better. And now you have this quarterback in Sam Levitt, who's only a redshirt freshman. He's from the Northwest. He's from Oregon. And you watch him from the beginning of the year till now. The amount of confidence he's playing with and how well he's executing and the way he's able to push the football down the field, it's a football team that's a lot of fun to watch.
I hope we don't lose that aspect of the development of the team, because it goes along with what we were talking about, and it is awesome to see a group of guys, gals, whatever sport we're talking about, come together and kind of grow into one, and then get that confidence. And the last weekend was, there's so many different directions we can go in this conversation, which is why college football is so much fun. And the last weekend was really interesting because I think I talked to you briefly before or we were texting maybe before the games, and it would have been very interesting had SMU won, Boise State won as they did, and Arizona State won. And then, where does the committee put these folks and these teams, and even the seating as it is now? People could argue, how in the heck is Arizona State 4 and Boise State 3? And if you didn't understand, like I didn't necessarily, how teams get seated when they're conference champion, highest seeded conference champion, all that. So not so much about that as how do you feel about the present format, not the 12 team, but how the seedings ended up. Because you can always look and say, well, that team lost to that team and they barely got by, all that transient property of game. But how do you feel about how the seedings fall into play at the end of the season? So you get the question.
Yeah, no, I do, Corey, and it's a fantastic question, and it's been talked about and debated for the last 3 days nonstop, and rightfully so, because people need to understand that rankings are different than seeding, and the biggest thing with the 12-team playoff is your 5 highest ranked conference champions get automatic bids into the bracket. One of those being a group of 5 school, the highest ranked group of 5 school. Well, with that, there's only 7 at large, I guess, invitations, if you will, available. So with that, you start getting into a dicey situation. Scenario 1 being what you initially said. What if SMU would have beat Clemson last week? Well, then Alabama would be in the 12-team playoff. The reason why they're not is because Clemson beating SMU gets the automatic conference bid. Okay. SMU was ranked higher going into championship weekend than Alabama. So now they retain their position in there, and Alabama's the first team that misses it, even though they're ranked number 11. They kind of fall to 13, if you will, in the bracket. So to your question, does it need to be amended? Absolutely. Yes, it does. And I say this with all due respect to Boise State, Arizona State, whoever else is in there, but how can you have Boise State, who, once again, with all due respect, great team, great coaching staff, you have a Heisman finalist, you've had a fantastic season. You don't have a single power conference win on your record this year, but you get a first round bye in the 3 seed. I think anyone who knows sports just knows that isn't right. Now, do I think Boise State deserves a spot in the playoff? I do, absolutely. But I think, do they deserve a bye? No, they don't. So that's the first thing, in my opinion, that needs to be amended is, just because you win a conference championship and you're one of the 4 highest ranked conference champions, I personally don't think that should automatically get you a first round bye. No. I think we need to rank the teams, the 12 best teams, 1 through 12, and those 12 go into the tournament, and whoever 1 through 4 is. If it's 4 teams out of the SEC, 4 out of the Big Ten, 2 out of the Big 12, 1 out of the ACC, 1 out of the SEC. You get the point. It doesn't matter where they come from. The 4 best teams in the country who've earned that bye should get it, in my opinion. Now, that would probably eliminate some of the incentive to the conference title. So then you would have to talk about where you value conference championships versus seeding. But the short answer is yes, I do think how we go about it and the protocols need to be amended. And I would expect this offseason to see some changes.
Having the 12-team playoff is great because it's so much more fun this way. And because you could even look at like Ohio State losing to Michigan and say, wait a second, they almost benefited from not winning that game in some ways. And they lost to a team that, frankly, this year just isn't really that good. And they lost to them at home, and it was second loss. And so in some ways, it's like you just lost your chance to get in the playoffs. Now, then you look at it and go, well, there's probably not 11 teams better than them based on everybody else's schedule. So it's just, you're never going to make everybody happy, I guess, is at the end of the day.
No, and you know this as an athlete and all the athletes listening, it is really hard to be perfect at anything. Meaning, it's really hard to go 12-0 in your regular season, regardless of what conference you play in, high school, pro, college, it doesn't matter. At any level, it is really hard to go undefeated. So I equate it in a lot of ways and kind of compare it to the National Football League. You can be a really good team, but more than likely, you're going to lose a couple games along the way. Yeah. But the ultimate goal in the NFL, yes, you would love to, earn one of those first round buys, but ultimately, you're trying to get the home field, but you're just trying to get into the playoffs. And if you can get to the playoffs, regardless of what happened in your regular season, if you can be the best team in football for 1 month, you're going to walk away a world champion.
Right.
And so you bring up Ohio State, and that's what sparked it in my mind. Yes, that loss to Michigan at home, fourth straight to your arch rival. Like, it was about as ugly as it can get, especially when you were supposed to win and you were supposed to win handedly. But if Ohio State can now find a way to go on a run over the next month, because they have a national championship roster at the end of the day. So if they can put it together as a team and play their best football finally in the year for 1 month and they win a national title, they're never going to think about the Michigan game. They're never going to think that they didn't get a rematch with Oregon to ultimately win the Big Ten title, because you're now chasing a national title.
Does Ryan Day lose his job if he doesn't win the national title, or does he only save his job if he wins the national title?
In your
mind,
that's a big debate. The thing I would say with Ryan, look at his record versus teams not named Michigan. It's really good. And I think most programs and fan bases and alumni, they would take what Ryan Day has done in his
100%.
tenure. Yeah. It's a fun debate though, because he hasn't been able to beat Michigan the last 4 seasons. But everything outside of that has been pretty darn good. And I think we all know that Michigan is not one of those 12 teams in the bracket. So it's going to be exciting to see what Ohio State can do. And they have a great first round matchup. They have Tennessee, coming into the Horseshoe. That's going to be a fantastic.
It's going to be fun. Yeah, no doubt. Well, you're familiar with rivalries. I'd be curious, if your coach at ASU lost to Arizona, it probably wouldn't happen in our lifetime, of course, right? 4 times in a row. But anyway, maybe the priorities are a little out of whack. Well, not to keep you too much longer, it's such an interesting thing now with where the colleges, where sports are headed now. Because the number now that the universities need to come up with is, go ahead, 22 million or something like that.
There's no official ruling as of yet. We're going to have to wait for the spring. But yes, you're 100% in the ballpark. I've heard as low as 20. I've heard as much as 22 million. So I think if you say 20 million, you're well within the ballpark.
Yeah, it's got to be something that's weighing heavily on these schools, whether it's the university president, athletic department, like, where the heck is this all going to come from, right? Because it's an arms race right now. There's obviously a lot of money in the sport, in the advertising and whatnot, the TV revenue, and you want to stay up there, and it's expensive to stay there.
Yeah, no doubt. And in a lot of ways, this proposed revenue sharing that I think more than likely is going to be signed into law, and we will see it start in fall 2025. It's certainly going to, we've talked transfer portal, we've talked NIL, and now you have in school revenue sharing. And so I think in a lot of ways, it's going to take pressure off of NIL programs. Now with the revenue share, universities and athletic departments can now directly pay athletes from that revenue sharing pool of roughly $20 million. Well, that will allow you, I think just common sense tells you, pay more players than what your NIL for a lot of schools is probably offering, give you a little more flexibility, more transparency. But with that, and I think the point that you're trying to make, schools have to go find that $20 million plus minus. They have to find that off the bottom line of their, books, for a lack of better words. And that's putting a lot of pressure on a lot of institutions because they want to compete at the highest level. They want to compete for national titles and conference titles. and they want to put the best product they possibly can on the field for their alumni and their fan base. And they're worried that if they don't fully participate in revenue share, that could be an issue fielding competitive teams. And so, no doubt about it, Corey, I would imagine universities are looking at every possibility. They're being strategic. They're having a lot of schools, I think, are probably consulting outside private business CEOs and industries and financial institutions. I've even heard athletic directors having conversations with general managers in the NFL. Hey, how do you guys go about attacking your salary cap? So another change in college athletics is more than likely coming next fall. How it plays out, no one truly knows yet. I would imagine it'll minimize what NIL programs are doing. But no doubt about it, it's going to put a lot of pressure on the university system to come up with that money to be able to share that revenue with their athletes.
What a lot to manage too. And, I know we've had conversations about our SHARx Unlimited program and where we can go with that and the dollars that we can help these universities with. And you've teed up a lot of conversations that will kick into high gear. I alluded to this earlier. Once we get past the first of the year here and probably after college football season ends and whatnot. But we're excited about the possibility of where we go with that and maybe make this a little bit more attainable, for these universities, because it's a whole new world they're in.
Well, it is. And like I said, I think university presidents and athletic directors and CFOs and everyone associated with this, they're looking for solutions and they're open and willing to listen. Obviously, you and your team have a great solution that can certainly benefit these universities if they're willing to listen and implement SHARx. But it'll be fun to see how all this plays out in the next couple months.
Well, we've gotten a long way into some of those conversations thanks to our relationship and all you do for SHARx. So appreciate that. So before we go though, who's going to win this thing? So we've talked a lot about this, the way this is set up. What do you think kind of plays out over the next 4 to 6 weeks with this thing?
You know what? Go figure. You would ask me this question. I thought to myself about 2 hours ago. I was like, I've yet to actually really look at the bracket and come up with who I think is going to win. And I know it's going to start coming up in interviews and just on air and things like that. Off the top of my head, Penn State getting SMU at home in the first round, depending on how the weather plays out up there. That's going to be interesting to watch. And then I believe if Penn State wins, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the winner of Penn State SMU, they're going to face Boise State. Does that sound right to you?
I think that's right, Brock, and I will say that I don't remember without going back to the bracket.
So Penn State, the opportunity to play at home in front of 105,000, SMU going up to the cold, you got to think Penn State's highly favored there. So if they can get that win, and then they're playing a Boise State team who outside of playing Oregon back in September, they haven't played competition like a Penn State would bring to them. And the way Penn State played Oregon the other night in the Big Ten title game, I don't think anybody thought Penn State could go toe-to-toe when it came to with Oregon, and they showed they could. So
you've got that bracket right too. You was looking at that. You're dead right on that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. So, you got to think Penn State's kind of in that mix. I don't know how you don't have a conversation about Georgia just with what they've done in the last 6-7 years. And Kirby Smart, obviously their quarterback, Carson Beck, and his status is in question. But you look at that. So Penn State is kind of this outlier that I don't know how many people are talking about. And then I'm trying to think on the other side of the bracket.
You got Clemson, Texas. Clemson plays Texas to start, and the winner of that gets Arizona State.
Yep.
Ohio State, Tennessee winner gets Oregon.
Yeah.
And then the last is the Indiana Notre Dame is playing Georgia.
So here's I could spend an hour breaking down all these teams on why they could or could not. But I will say this, it goes back to one thing, and it's what we talked about earlier. It's why I'm stuttering around picking one team. It's because of the parity. It's the parity. You could say Notre Dame, hey, they're going to do it because they have a great defense. They run the football so well. But is Riley Leonard going to be able to make the passes necessary to win games in the playoffs? Yep. We talked about Georgia. We talked about Penn State, Texas. Top
great
to
defense.
bottom, one of the
great defense.
Yes, fantastic defense, and some questions on the offensive line, but talent. Do they get it going? Does Ohio State, the team we just talked about, if they get it going, we got to remember who Ohio State's play caller on offense is. It's Chip Kelly. He's one of the best college offensive coordinators in the last couple decades. So if they get it going, and if Will Howard starts playing a bit better, so. I don't know. I can't pick one team. I would need a little bit of heads up, and I would dive into that bracket, really look at the true matchups, because that's ultimately what it's going to come down to. It might not necessarily be the best team, but it's, well, who's your matchup that week? Can you win? All right, you win, great. Who's your matchup the following week? How does your line match up to their line? How does skill match up to skill? It's going to be fun. That's all I know. It's going to be so exciting.
Can't wait. And you've got some more work to do the next few weeks. You got some ball games, doing some FCS stuff too, right?
I do. So I'm going to do an FCS semifinal. I'll do the FCS national title in January. And then I have a couple good bowl games. I'll be doing Texas A&M, USC in Las Vegas. And then I'll be doing Michigan, Alabama, down in Tampa at the ReliaQuest Bowl. And then the next day, racing up to Atlanta to watch my Sun Devils take on either Clemson or Texas. So busy football month in the Osweiler household.
Well, awesome. I hope you have an incredibly great Christmas with your family. I hope they get to see you for the holidays, because I know you're going to be busy, and it's a blast to talk to you. Looking forward to what lies ahead here next year together as we work through all the opportunities that you've got kind of queued up. So what a blast, Brock. Thanks for the conversation today, and congrats on, I enjoy listening to you on college football game days and your broadcasts. To me, you are doing just a great job. You've grown a ton in what you do there, and you bring a lot to the broadcast.
Oh, well, I really appreciate that, Corey, and thank you for having me on. I look forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah, talk to you soon, Brock. Have a good Christmas.
Take care, Corey. Thanks.